Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us on CELPIP Live. You know, we start each episode with a trivia question. So here's your question for today. When did Canada become a self-governing dominion? Let me repeat that. When did Canada become a self-governing dominion? Let me know the answer in the comments below. You can also share this image and your answer on Instagram with the hashtag CELPIPLive, and we may feature it on our feed. I will reveal the response towards the end of our segment. For now, let's start our show. If you're new here, CELPIP Live is an interactive YouTube series made to help CELPIP test takers understand more about the CELPIP test. If you're about to write the test, please subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as we go live. If you have any questions about prep, you can ask them in the chat. Today we're talking about speaking, so please wait for Brandy's presentation to finish. She may already answer your question during the prep, but of course we will also be entertaining questions afterwards. In today's episode, Brandy is discussing task 3 of the speaking section. She's back and ready to practice with you, so let's go say hello to her. Hi, Brandy. How are you doing?
Hi, Ashwai. I'm very well. Thanks for having me back on the show.
Thank you for joining us. So as always, I'm going to let you get started. We have a good turnout today as well, so stage is all yours.
Okay, sounds good. I'm just going to share my screen, so one moment here. All right, so we're back to do some more speaking practice because we had some requests from some of our viewers to do so. So we're going to focus on task 3 today, which asks you to describe a scene. So just before we get into today's practice question, I'd like to just introduce the speaking test in general for CELPIP. So there are 8 different speaking tasks that you will complete when you do the CELPIP test. And for each and every question, you will have a short amount of time to prepare so you can think about your answer before you actually start to speak out loud. Now, when you deliver your response on the test, you're never going to come face to face with a human reader. You'll be sitting in front of your computer. You'll be recording your voice into a microphone. And the recording that you make will be listened to later on by several professional raters. And that's where the score will come from. So hopefully you won't be nervous as you won't be talking to any one person. Every single task that you complete is going to assess a different skill for communication. And these are skills that you would be using in your day-to-day life. So this is how the entire speaking test fits together. As I say, there are 8 tasks. That very first task at the top, task 0, it's a practice task just to warm up your voice and check out your equipment. But then as you can see, each and every task has a different focus. For every single question, as I mentioned, you'll have a little bit of time to prepare. So most of the time you'll have 30 seconds. For 2 tasks, you will have a full minute to think about your answer before you start to speak out loud. Your speaking time as well is usually 1 minute, but there are 2 tasks that will ask you to speak just a little bit longer. So a full 90 seconds here in task 1 and in task 7. So for today's practice, we're going to target task 3 here, describing a scene. And this one, you'll have 30 seconds to think and a full minute in which to speak. Now let's just quickly have a look at the scoring chart. So before you practice at home, it's really important to understand where the scores are coming from. So you will receive an individual score on every single speaking task that you deliver on your test. So as you can see here at the low end of the chart is an M, and that stands for minimal proficiency. So somebody earning an M on their speaking tasks for CELPIP would be a low beginner, somebody that's just starting out with their language studies. And then as you see, as you climb that chart to the top, the highest score that you might achieve is a level 12. And this would indicate advanced proficiency. All right, so that's where your scores partly will come from. We're going to look at this question today for practice purposes. So this was once upon a time a real question on a past CELPIP test. So I'm going to read the instructions out loud and we'll start to think about how we might begin to prepare for this. It says to describe some things that are happening in the picture below as well as you can. The person with whom you are speaking cannot see the picture. Now on your real test, you can see here that you'll have that 30 seconds to think. What I'd like to present today is I'm going to demonstrate how you can practice, how you can study at home before you even go into the testing center to take your test. So when you first start out to practice your speaking, I would recommend that you don't worry right now about the timer. So we're not going to set a timer today while we're practicing. Instead, what we want to do is focus on building the skills necessary in order to be able to deliver this response successfully. So that's what I'll demonstrate now. We're going to do this question a little bit backwards. We're going to start just by addressing the second half. This question does tell you that you are speaking to someone. They simply just can't see the picture. So imagine that there's even a stranger or a friend, I guess, in another room that can't see what you're looking at. Your job is to give enough detail to describe this image so that that person could close their eyes and imagine in their minds what it is you're looking at. So that's an ultimate goal here for this question. So when you begin your response, you want to start off with a half of a sentence even to establish that you are indeed speaking out loud to somebody. So think of an easy way to introduce that concept. You might start indirectly. You might just start by saying, in this picture, I see, and you can go from there. You can even make up a name if you want to address the listener specifically. You might say, hi, Dave, I'm looking at a picture of, and then you would continue the response from there. In your opening, before you even start to describe the individual parts of this picture, it's really important to introduce the scene itself. Provide an overview to anchor that scene in your listener's mind. So clearly, when we look at this picture, we can see that there are many people here that are in some sort of a fitness room. So your opening will convey that meaning. You might say something simply like this. So in this picture, I see many people working out at a fitness center. So this is how you would start this response. All right, again, you would adjust the wording to correctly identify the image that you'll be given on your test. So now that we've addressed our opening, we've established we're talking to somebody and we have at least an overview of what that room is looking like. We're going to spend most of our study time looking at this part of the question. So we have to describe some things that are happening. This is the main part of this entire task. So when you're practicing at home, I would advise, please, that you have a pen and paper ready. You will have pen and paper in the real test, so you can certainly practice this way at home. And I would recommend that you just look at that picture and start picking and choosing different things to talk about. You're going to write down the keywords or vocabulary of the people and identify what they're doing. Again, we're not going to worry about time quite yet. Our skill right now is to generate ideas and get that vocabulary coming. So here's a really helpful tip for practice and as well as delivery on your test. You'll want to establish some sort of an order. So when you're describing what's happening in this picture, you can choose if you want to start at the top of this picture and then work your way to the bottom, let's say. Maybe you'll start by describing what's happening on the left and move your way over to the right. You might just even want to go in a circle around the picture, counterclockwise or clockwise. It's really up to you. But if you choose some sort of an organized fashion, you'll help yourself out. You'll keep yourself on task. But you're also going to help the listener be able to follow. Remember, they can't see this picture. So if you have some sort of an organized pattern, it's going to help them imagine what it is you're looking at. So while you're studying from home with your paper and pen, what I'd like you to do is pick a starting point. So just by random choice here, let's start with these people up here in the top corner. So you're going to focus first on the actions because you're asked to describe what's happening. So these people are clearly running on a treadmill. So we've got that idea in mind. And if we just go in a circle in a clockwise direction, we might describe this man down here. And it looks like he's doing push-ups. Now the girl beside him is doing several things, it looks like. We can see she's sitting on some sort of a bouncy ball, I guess. And it looks like she's drinking out of a container with one hand. And in her other hand, it looks like she's holding a stopwatch. So we can say that she's timing. And in this case, we don't know for sure if this is a brother and sister team, but because their hair color's the same, they look similar, we're going to introduce the notion that they're brother and sister. So you can create some of these details as you speak, as long as they're logical. So we'll suggest that this little girl is timing her brother who's doing the push-ups. So next to them in the center of the room, it looks like a man who is bench pressing. So he's lifting weights. This young girl is also weightlifting, or maybe curling weights, you could say. This fellow is boxing. Up here, it looks like the woman is heading into the showers. And at the back, it looks like a mother and daughter who are leaving the gym, we can say. So again, this is just your first assessment of the picture, really focusing in on who's there and what they're doing. Now you'll notice that for every single action we have described, every single action verb ends with an ing. And this is really important for your grammar structure for this particular task. This question says to describe some things that are happening. So what that means is we're going to focus on actions that are happening right now, and those actions will be continuing. They're ongoing as we discuss this picture. So because of that, we're going to use the present continuous verb tense. So just like the name of that verb tense implies, present means happening now, continuous, actions ongoing. To create this verb tense, what we need to do is always start with the person or the thing that's doing the action. So we see a sample sentence here on our screen. It says, a woman is running on a treadmill. So that accurately describes part of this picture. So the woman in this case is the subject of our sentence. She's the person that's doing the action. So it's important to start with that in your sentence. You'll notice that the verb is 2 words long. So that second word there in the middle, this word is, it's not an action word, but it actually is part of the verb. This is called a helping verb or a linking verb. So to create this present continuous verb tense, we need to choose from the verb to be. And the only choices in the present tense for this verb would be am, is, or are. So we're going to choose the word that matches the subject. We need to create correct subject-verb agreement. So because the woman is one person, singular, she's also third person, the only word here that makes sense grammatically would be the word is. So that's why we've chosen that particular word. And then the last part of this verb is the action part. So you can see the root verb is to run, and all we're doing is adding an ing to that. So to complete this verb tense correctly, we have a woman is running. And then you can finish the sentence in whatever way makes sense. So in this picture, we can see that she's running on a treadmill. So you will use that verb tense over and over again as you're going around the picture and describing the different things that are happening. So that's a really good tip, I think, to know. So again, when you're practicing at home, even though we're not worried right now about our time, we still need to be aware of the skills that we want to demonstrate on the real test. The raters will be assessing you on 4 different categories. We call them dimensions. The very first thing they look for is content and coherence. So really, they want to see how many ideas you're able to discuss in the time frame on the test. So we've got several different people in the picture we're going to talk about. So the number of ideas I think is okay. But the quality of your ideas is also part of your score. So the more specific examples you can provide, the more descriptive, the more precise, that's really going to help elevate the quality of your answer overall. We've already chosen an organized pattern for this question. So we're going around the picture in a circular fashion. So again, that's going to help for content and coherence itself. So again, now that we've identified all parts of this picture, we know that on the real test in 60 seconds, you're not going to have time to talk about every single person in the scene. So you get to choose maybe 4 or 5 parts, I would suggest, as a good number. Pick and choose the parts that you find the most interesting, but also pick and choose the parts where you've got the vocabulary to describe what's happening. If there's something happening in this picture and you don't know what the word is, just don't talk about that part. Choose something else that you're more comfortable describing. So you definitely do have some control over what you want to describe. So looking at this picture, let's just remove a few details. So we're going to narrow down our choice now to 5 different parts of this picture that we'll describe, again, for practice purposes. So once you've decided on those parts, I'd like you please at home to make some really short notes. You can see here that these 5 different entries describe those 5 different parts that we're going to talk about. We've left in that ing action, so we can see what the people are doing, and there are a couple of short forms here as well. So keep your notes as short as possible, but just make sure that you can follow what they mean. You can have your notes facing you as you speak on the real test. And the reason you would take these notes is to keep you on track, so you know exactly what you'll say as you're talking. Okay, so before you actually start practicing out loud at home, The next thing that you need to consider is that the raters are also going to assess your vocabulary. So the word choice that you make is really important here. The words that you use must be suitable for the task. They have to fit in naturally into the description that you're giving. But we're also hoping you've got a nice range. We don't want to just repeat the same word over and over again. That gets really boring for the listener. So you'll impress the raters most by having a nice, widely developed vocabulary. Use descriptive language for this task since you are describing a scene in the first place. All right, and the words that we use, of course, need to be used accurately as well. So a couple of tips I can share with you now about the vocabulary choice that you'll make as you're describing this out loud. So the first thing I'll point out is that it's helpful for your listener to understand where the people are in the picture that you're describing in relationship to each other. So we should be using some prepositional phrases from time to time. Now, prepositions are those really small words in English, words like in, on, at, to. We use these words when we're giving information about time or place. So right now for this task, it's the place that we're most interested in. So here's a huge list. There are so many different prepositional phrases you can use. So you'll see that each phrase or each group of words here in the example list, they all start with one of these prepositions. So the first one here says in the back right corner. So if you hear me say that out loud, your eyes would go to the back right corner of the room. And then you would finish the statement. You know, in the back right corner, there are two people running on a treadmill, that sort of thing. So every time, again, you come to a new part of the picture, it's helpful to give some sort of a description as to where they are. So you can see other examples here listed on your screen. So you will be using prepositional phrases throughout the answer. Descriptive language is really important. So because you're asked to describe what's happening in the scene, of course, you're going to focus on the people and what they're doing. So in this list of ideas here, you can see the word actions is bolded. And that's because it's the most important part of this answer. We need to have those action verbs in the present continuous to understand what's going on. But you can certainly include other descriptive details like you see here. So you can talk about the height or the age of these people if it fits into the response. Sometimes you can describe what they're wearing or even describe their facial expression and their mood. So looking at this photo, you know that we've got several men and several women and even a few children. So if you can give a couple of details to distinguish them from each other. So maybe one of the men is wearing a yellow shirt and the other man's wearing a red tank top. So by adding in these descriptive details, you're helping the listener keep track of which person you're describing at a time. All right, so we'll look at a couple examples of how all of these skills will come together. So we're going to take a prepositional phrase and some of these descriptive language details here. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see two sentences that accurately describe one part of this picture. So you might say, a tall young man is running on a treadmill in the back right corner of the gym. He's wearing blue jeans and a bright yellow shirt. Okay, so you can close your eyes and imagine what's going on there. And that's what you want to do for your listener. Let's just look at one more example while we're on that topic. So here you might say, on the treadmill beside him, a fit woman wearing black shorts and a white t-shirt is jogging energetically. Okay, so again, you notice that we're still talking about that back corner, but we know that these two people are side by side. So again, you'll work your way through the picture, adding in these details and locating them for your listener as you go. Now, from time to time, you might have some objects that are worthy of descriptions as well. I think you'll be talking about the people much more, but there might be an object that comes into the description. So in this case, you can think of these descriptive details. You might describe the size or the color, even the shape and material if it's important to the scene itself. So we can look at maybe one example here. We might say, a square blue crash mat covers the front right corner of the gym. A young man is doing push-ups on the mat and he looks tired. He's wearing a thin blue headband. Okay, so we started off by describing the crash mat only because the man is on that mat and he's doing push-ups. So that's how we're connecting those ideas together. And the fact that he's doing push-ups, I think it's nice to mention that he looks tired. That's part of the description of what it is he's doing. So by adding in these descriptive details, as I mentioned, you're elevating your vocabulary and also elevating the quality of your content description. You're also filling 60 seconds of talk time. So for people who are worried they won't have enough to talk about, look at some of the details you can add in to take up that time effectively as well. So all of these skills are working together to produce a stronger answer. Now, after you've sorted out the details and you've practiced some of these vocabulary ideas at home, remember you still need to conclude your answer somehow. So your very last sentence will likely just summarize the main scene. So we started off by explaining that we're looking at a gym where people are exercising. So we can say something along those lines. So something simple like this would effectively close out the entire answer. So the members at this gym are staying in shape. After you've described things and you say this, the listener should understand that you're now finished describing the picture. So we've organized the response, hopefully, in a very clear fashion that will help with our score. So all of that practice at home is going to take quite some time. You might break that up into a couple of different days or have a very intensive study session. What I would recommend that you try at home is practice expressing that response out loud. You've got now your notes facing you. You've got the image on the screen as well facing you. So practice putting these ideas into sentence form. Speak out loud at home and repeat your ideas as many times as you need to in order to confidently speak from beginning to end without stopping. So we're hoping that you're not interjecting. You're not saying, If you have to do that to think about your next idea, it just means you need more practice. So I would focus on, again, repeating your answer out loud as many times as you need until you can get it fluent from beginning to end. When that's done, when you've accomplished that after practice, I'd recommend that you record your answer. So maybe use your cell phone, record your voice speaking into that cell phone as you're looking at the scene, and then play it back. And you'll be able to see exactly what you sound like when you're speaking. So you'll be able to assess your voice. You'll also be able to listen out for different vocabulary ideas and so on. So you're starting to assess your strengths and your weaknesses. So this is what we're going to listen to now. We've got a female speaker who has practiced the study steps that we've just finished discussing. And after she practiced her answer out loud several times until she was really confident, she recorded her voice. So we're going to listen to her now say her answer out loud. And as we're looking at the scene, I'd also like all of us to note how the short, simple notes on the screen are informing the order of events that she's talking about. So you'll see how it all starts to come together. All right, let's listen to her answer now.
In this picture, I see many people working out at a fitness center. A tall young man is running on a treadmill in the back right corner of the gym. He's wearing blue jeans and a bright yellow shirt. On the treadmill beside him, a fit woman wearing black shorts and a white t-shirt is jogging energetically. A square blue crash mat covers the front right corner of the room. A young man is doing push-ups on the mat, and he looks tired. He's wearing a thin blue headband. A young girl, maybe his sister, is sitting in front of him on a pink bouncy stability ball. She's drinking juice through a straw while timing her brother on a stopwatch to see how many push-ups he can complete in a short amount of time. In the opposite corner, a young girl is lifting a light dumbbell while her brother is boxing. A heavy red boxing bag is hanging from the ceiling, and he is punching it with his bright red boxing gloves. The members of this gym are staying in shape.
Response is recorded after she had practiced speaking it aloud several times. This recording was not her first attempt. So the point is to practice speaking until you're confident enough to record fluently. There were no pauses or no glaring interjections at all when she spoke here. So this is ultimately the goal that we're aiming for, to be able to speak this way or close to it when we actually deliver the test. So one thing to note as well that the raters are going to assess you on is also your listenability. They'll be listening to see that you are pronouncing your words properly, that your voice has the correct rhythm and intonation. So you'll notice that the voice will rise and fall naturally. Hopefully there are no major pauses, and if you're interjecting at all, you're not doing it too often. So that's really important. So again, when you listen to your own recording of your own voice, you'll be able to assess this yourself. Sometimes we're not aware that we're interjecting until we listen to our voices. So do some self-assessment there. The grammar and the sentence structure is also part of this dimension. So the raters will actually include that when they score here. But what we're going to do is look at the grammar and the sentence structure next. So this is the next part of your study habits at home, I'm hoping. Now that you've got a recording of your voice, I encourage you to type out your own transcript. It takes a little bit of time and patience to type out word for word what you've just finished saying. But as soon as you've got your transcript in front of you, you're now going to be able to assess how well you're using the ideas to accurately describe the scene. So again, we're not worried about time right now. In a study session at home, our goal right now is to workshop the response to improve it, to make sure that it's as good as we can get it. So the first thing that I would look at if it were my transcript is I would first assess the framework. So remember, the content and organization is important. So double check that you've given that overview statement in the beginning, as you see here we have. So we've identified that people are working out at a fitness center. Double check that you've got a conclusion. So in this case, we see one. The members at the gym are staying in shape. So the framework sounds pretty good so far. We've got lots of details in the middle, which is exactly what we want. I'd also encourage you to see if you're correctly using your prepositional phrases. So you see all these bolded expressions here. These are all examples of those phrases that locate where in the scene these are happening. And you'll notice there are 5 different prepositional phrases. And that's because the speaker chose to talk about 5 parts of the scene. So every time she came to a new part of that scene, she introduced one of these prepositional phrases just to allow the listener to understand where in the scene these things are happening. So that takes a little bit of practice. Okay, we can now look at the actions themselves and the people. So based on our notes, all of the bolded words here are the people that we're talking about, and the yellow highlights show the actions that they're doing. So this is that present continuous verb tense. So you can recognize the ing action verbs. So again, thinking of the number of ideas that the raters are scoring us on, we can see that we've got lots of ideas here to describe. So we've done that part of the response really well. The next thing that you'll want to do, though, is to assess the quality of the description itself. So as I scan this document quickly, I can see that although the ideas make sense, there's a glaring repetition. I'm looking specifically at the people. And we've used this particular adjective to describe the different people in the scene. We've used the word young 4 different times. And that's far too much. The raters will not be impressed for our vocabulary use there. So what you would do then in this case at home is workshop it. Try to find different ways to express these ideas, to change the vocabulary up so you've got more of a variety. I think we can leave the word young once, but let's see if we can think of different ways to be more precise with the ideas and the language. So in that very first line up top there, you can see that we've taken out the word young, and in red, we've added in a more precise description. So instead of just saying a tall young man, we're saying a tall man in his 20s. So that's more precise, it's more focused. So again, the listener can close their eyes and imagine what this person might look like. That second example down, you see instead of a young man, we're now saying a teenager, right? We can substitute that word to avoid the repetition. The third example, when we said a young girl, maybe his sister, that was a bit wordy anyways. So why not just say his younger sister is sitting in front of him? So we're being more concise there and changing the language just a little bit. And I think provided that we've revised the language in those cases, we can leave the fourth example alone. So a young girl seems to make sense now. So as I read out just the people in the scene, let's do a double check that the language is precise and a bit more varied. So we've got here a tall man in his 20s, a fit woman, a teenager, his younger sister, a young girl, her brother, and we mentioned the heavy red boxing bag at the end. So at least now the vocabulary in that respect is more varied. So that's a good step in the right direction. We've done some nice improvements there. Okay, the next thing that we should be looking at here is the descriptive language that we've used in order to describe these people and the actions that they're doing. So these are the green words now that you can see highlighted on the screen. So I'll just start by reading them out loud, and we'll make some changes as we go if we see anything that's a bit weak. So we started off with a tall man, and then we mentioned he was wearing blue jeans, a bright yellow shirt, and then we get the fit woman. We mentioned she's wearing black shorts and a white t-shirt. This description for me is a little weak because first of all, it's repetitive. So I don't want to get into the same formula, step-by-step description of describing everybody's clothes, everyone's actions. That kind of repetition in sentence structure and idea is not going to demonstrate variety. So that's one thing I'd like to fix. The second aspect that I'm looking at this response and wondering, we're supposed to be focusing on what's happening in the picture. So I think instead of, when we look at that woman, instead of describing what she's wearing, I think we can do better. We can come up with a different descriptive idea that connects more obviously into the action that she's doing, which is jogging energetically on the treadmill. So let's remove the description of her clothes, because that doesn't really add a lot of value to the scene. Instead, when we say that she's jogging energetically, let's add this phrase in here in red. We can say her long dark hair blowing behind her as she speeds up. So we're still describing what she looks like, but we're connecting that idea into this action of speeding up and running energetically on the treadmill. So we're more directly focusing on the question itself when it says describe some things that are happening. I think this is a better idea. It's stronger. We've also created a complex sentence structure too by doing this. So really by changing that one idea, we've made several improvements there. At another glance, when you scan over the document, I noticed that I've gotten a little bit carried away here again by describing what people are wearing. And although it's okay to do that once in a while, I don't want to just focus on the clothing. In the same frame of thought here, when I talk about that man wearing that thin blue headband, I'd like to connect that back into somehow what he's doing. So we already know that he's on the crash mat doing push-ups and he looks tired. So maybe I change the sentence to something like this. A thin blue headband is keeping his hair out of his eyes. So at least that completes the description of him being very tired and doing these push-ups. I think it's a better idea overall, and it still covers some of that descriptive language to allow the listener to close their eyes and imagine what this man looks like. So we can add that in as well. So as we keep looking at the green vocabulary or descriptive language, I like the next one when it says pink bouncy stability ball. I think that's a great description there. And then we get light dumbbell. At the bottom, we see heavy red boxing bag and then bright red boxing gloves. And again, the description's accurate, but it's repetitive. We've said red boxing in both descriptions. So I think we should revise one or the other. Since it's the boxing bag that's hanging from the ceiling, I think we can leave that part alone. But why don't we change the description of what the man is doing? So we know he's boxing. We know he's punching that bag. But instead of describing the boxing gloves, can we just talk about his emotion? So as he's punching this bag, he's got a serious look of concentration on his face. So that completes the description more of what he's doing. And again, it changes up the vocabulary so we don't have so much repetition. So we can insert that into the scene. And again, it's a little bit more varied, which is the whole point of what we're trying to do here. So when you've workshopped your response, you've corrected any grammar mistakes maybe that you've seen, you hopefully eventually will come up with a final transcript that has been improved. Okay, and again, it takes time to do this. You might spend a good half hour or more looking at your transcript and finding ways to improve it. You can work with a tutor, you can work with a prep provider, or even somebody who's really proficient in English. But do some work on your own there to figure out how to make the response better. And the last thing I guess we should really look at is the sentence structure here. Let's do that really quickly. So now that we've got a revised idea, we can see we've started here with a prepositional phrase. We've got a simple sentence structure. We've got a simple sentence structure there, and we put the prepositional phrase at the end. Down here, we've got some complex ideas, and a quick scan through again reveals more complex sentence structures. So we've mixed in some of these complex ideas with some compound ideas and some simple sentence structures too. Okay, so just do a quick look over to make sure that, again, you've got a good variety there. So the very last thing that your raters are going to look at when you give your answer on the test is called task fulfillment. So they want to double check that all of the ideas you've included there are relevant, meaning they describe accurately what this picture is all about. So I know that we've done that just from our discussions and looking at that revised transcript. I'm confident that our details are relevant. And I think we've given a very complete answer as well, because we have talked about so many different parts of that scene. The tone will be considered. The tone is off. Sometimes your tone of voice will convey emotion, but often it's the word choice that you make that will create the emotion that the listener is hearing. In this case, we're simply describing what we're looking at. So the tone is nothing special. I think it's fine the way that that speaker read it out loud. On the real test, remember, the length will be considered. So right now, as you're practicing at home, we're not too worried yet about time. But before you go to take the actual test, you will need to practice setting a timer for that 60 seconds and finishing off your description in that length of time. So keep that in mind too. For your final step at home as you're practicing, now that you've got your revised, improved transcript, what I would recommend you do one final time is read your transcript out loud and even record your voice doing that. So then you can listen back to that improved version of your answer while you're looking at the image. So now again, you're assessing how accurately you've described the picture, but I'm hoping that you yourself are noticing the improvements that you've made. And these are going to train your brain, so to speak, for your further practice and for your performance on the test. You're now much more aware of the type of information you're including, things like prepositional phrases and descriptive detail. So we're going to listen to that same female speaker that we heard earlier. She's done these exact same steps. So she's now going to record herself reading that final transcript. Let's listen and follow along with the picture at the same time.
In this picture, I see many people working out at a fitness center. A tall man in his 20s is running on a treadmill in the back, right corner of the gym. He's wearing blue jeans and a bright yellow shirt. On the treadmill beside him, a fit woman is jogging energetically, her long dark hair blowing behind her as she speeds up. A square blue crash mat covers the front right corner of the room. A teenager is doing push-ups on the mat, and he looks tired. A thin blue headband is keeping his hair out of his eyes. His younger sister is sitting in front of him on a pink bouncy stability ball. She's drinking juice through a straw while timing her brother on a stopwatch to see how many push-ups he can complete in a short amount of time. In the opposite corner, a young girl is lifting a light dumbbell while her brother is boxing. A heavy red boxing bag is hanging from the ceiling, and he is punching it with a serious look of concentration on his face. The members at this gym are staying in shape.
It's similar to our first response, but those improvements that we've made really make a difference, right? It's more precise and a little bit more elevated too with our language choice. So the very last step that I'd encourage you to try at home as you've practiced all of these steps, once you've gotten to this stage and you're able to deliver a strong response, now the real challenge happens because you're going to put your transcripts away. You're not going to look at them. You're now going to look at the image and deliver your answer to the best of your ability, just using the notes that you made that you see here in front of you on the screen. So again, you've already got ideas about what you can talk about because you've already just recorded and worked on that finalized version. But in the test itself, remember, your speech is going to be very natural. So using these notes, try that again as many times as it takes until, again, you can speak fluently from beginning to end. This is where you're now going to set a timer at home as you're practicing. So once you've developed that strong foundation of skills and you know what to talk about and how to organize your answer, you're going to fine tune it now by keeping an eye on the timer. You need to be able to finish up your description in 60 seconds in order to be successful on this task. So that means you might need to be a little bit flexible. If the timer is almost finished and you've only had time to talk about 4 parts of the scene, that's okay. You'll have to cut out that final idea and wrap up with your conclusion on the spot. On the other hand, if you've talked about all 5 of these ideas and you see you still have about 12 seconds left on your time, you're going to have to pick another part of the scene right on the spot and describe it just as you have the others. And you're making up those details as you go along before you conclude. Again, this is what you might have to do on the real test. So it's really important to practice this at home authentically so that you're confident and you know you can do it before you take the CELPIP speaking test. So I'm just going to wrap up today by summarizing some of these study tips that we've done. It is an actual process. We can divide it into 3 different stages of studying. So of course, when you start studying, you read the question, good place to start. For this task, I would recommend you choose 4 to 5 parts of that image and make those point form notes. That's a really nice place to start. So remember to speak out loud. Take as much time as you need while you're starting this off. Use your notes to guide you, but speak out loud until you can form sentences that are descriptive, describing each of those parts of the image. Okay, do this until you're confident and you can speak from beginning to end. When you're ready, you'll record your answer, listen to it back, and type out your own transcript. So that's step number 1. With your transcript, you're going to look it over and improve it, revise it wherever you need to. So for some of us, we might need to add more specific language. Some of us might need to change our vocabulary to avoid repetition. Some of us might need to actually correct verb tense issues or subject-verb agreement issues. So whatever you can do to improve the quality of your response, that's what you're going to do now with your transcript. Okay, again, don't worry about time. Take all the time you need to improve those skills. Once you've practiced that out loud a few times, again, you can record the second answer. And when you play it back, looking at the picture, you should notice the improvements. It should be slightly, hopefully a lot better than the first one. So when that's all finished, the final step is a challenging one because you put away all the transcripts you've worked on, and you're now going to use just what you've trained your mind to know. Use the notes in front of you, but speak naturally looking at that picture and try to deliver the answer fluently from beginning to end. Remember those descriptive details. Repeat it until you can do it from beginning to end with a timer. You're going to add in the time when you're ready to do so. Again, it's really important to be able to do this in 60 seconds so that you're more prepared for the real test. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and come back to all of you. And if you have any questions, I am happy to answer them now.
Hi, Randy.
Hi.
Okay, so we do have a couple of questions.
Great.
Let me go back to, okay. Here, Zeus says, for task 3, do we have to speak with transitions?
Transitions are words or phrases that actually organize the details when you add them together. In this case, the prepositional phrases that you're using act as your transitions. So technically, we have used transitions, right? That's what a transition is. Other words like conjunctions, we use to join ideas together for sentence structure. So yeah, we should be using transitions of some fashion to organize this response. But again, if you use your prepositional phrases for this task, you've done that.
Okay, thank you for that. There's another question here. Should we give the outline of the picture in task 3 and explain the remaining in part 4?
Okay, so just to clarify for our viewers, the next speaking task on CELPIP, task 4, will give you the same exact picture that we just described here for task 3. But in task 4, your job there is to make predictions about what's going to come next. So it's a completely different task. When you're describing task 3, you're giving a complete and thorough description of what it is you're seeing. Don't save any description to get into for the next task. Use your 60 seconds for task 3 to precisely and specifically describe what you can in that 60 seconds of time.
Okay, thank you. Here's another question. At the time of describing the scene, is it necessary that more sentences we use to describe should be complex sentences instead of simple sentences?
Yeah, I think the more examples of complexity that you can demonstrate, the better your score is going to be overall as well. So we want more complex and more compound sentences. Simple sentences are okay once in a while, but what we want to avoid is just speaking in short, simple sentences. So again, this is partly when you workshop your transcript, you're identifying in your own writing. If you notice that you've only spoken aloud in simple sentences, you're going to want to spend some time learning how to create complex structures. And that, of course, will help you not just in your speaking, but also in your writing. So yeah, the more complexity you can demonstrate, the better your score will be. Sentence structure specifically is evaluated under the dimension of listenability, which is part of the speech presentation. So that's where that will come from in the scoring process itself.
Okay, here's another one. What's the mark she scored on the transcript before and after modification?
Yeah, so remember that this was an example, a demonstration today of how you could study at home. So these responses that you heard today have never been professionally rated. They were not given in an authentic test setting. This was another person who's practicing for the test, following these steps that we were outlining today. So I don't know what the scores would be, to be very honest, but hopefully you can see the steps that she's used in order to put it all together to deliver a very focused and well-organized answer.
Okay, great. Here's one. Is it better to talk about the whole picture or talk in details about a few people?
Both. You're going to start by giving the whole picture overview. So in this case, we know we're looking at people working out in a gym. So you've just addressed the whole picture. You're now going to pick and choose different parts of the image to talk about. So in 60 seconds, a good goal to aim for would be 4 or 5 different parts. that everyone's a little bit different. So some people talk a lot more. They have more detail to say. So if I've got many more descriptive details, I might only have time to talk about 4 parts of the scene. But somebody else who doesn't add quite as much description, they might have time to talk about 5, maybe even 6 parts of the scene. So it's a little subjective. You do have some flexibility there. Your job, though, is to provide as much of an image, a mind image, as you can. So again, remember, your listener can't see that picture. If you spend 60 seconds talking about just one part of it, you're not giving your listener a very good idea about what you're looking at. So pick and choose different parts of the scene and try to cover what you can in an organized fashion, right?
Thank you, Brandy. Okay, here's one question. Okay.
Yeah.
What happens if you run out of, there are actually 2 questions that are the same topic, so I'll ask this one and I'll share the other one as well. What happens if you run out of time in the middle of a sentence? That's one. And then there's this one. If I'm unable to give a conclusion statement, but I have described 4 to 5 elements well, will this affect my scores?
Yeah, both very valid questions. So first of all, when the 60 seconds on the real test is finished, the recording's just going to stop. So again, if you're in the middle of your sentence, that's too bad. The recording's going to cut off. You're not going to be able to finish what you were saying. Now, if you're in the middle of a main idea, so for task 3, if you're in the middle of describing a part of the scene and you get cut off, that will affect your score a little bit, right, under the task fulfillment and under the content. So we don't want to get cut off in the middle of a main idea. This is where actually practicing with the timer at home is going to help you do that. So you'll see that, if you've got 5 seconds left, now is not the time to start talking about a new part. The concluding statement, it's helpful to have. We're hoping that there is some sort of a conclusion. In this case, though, if you do get cut off right in the middle of that final statement, but it's obvious to the raters that you're finished and you were just wrapping up, it's not going to affect your score at all, as long as you've given a very complete description of what you were looking at. Like, it's just clear that you're finished, and that's that. Yeah. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Brandy. Okay, let's ask this one. Can we use of the background or on the foreground to explain the image?
You can, but what I'd like you to do is change your preposition. So you're going to say in the background or in the foreground. So this is an example of precise and accurate word choice. So again, we know what you mean there by background and foreground, but when you're using prepositions, and I'll mention this, prepositions are really a pain in the neck. That's a good slang expression. For people learning English as another language, prepositions are tough because there are not really any rules. You have to memorize which preposition goes with which phrase. So here's a good one. I'm really glad that this person's brought it up. If you want to use background and foreground, remember, memorize this right now. The correct usage would be in. In the background of the picture, we see a mother and her young child about to leave the gym, and so on. Yeah. Oh, I think Ashwati is muted. There she is.
Right. I said I had an interesting one here. What if my description of the scene is different from what you have in mind?
Okay, well, your description of the scene has to accurately describe what it is you're looking at. So that's the key element. If you're describing something completely different from what's actually happening, your score is not going to be very strong. So again, just make sure your vocab is describing who and what you're looking at, and describe the actions that are happening accurately. So that's your primary focus. As long as you do that, somebody who is imagining what you're looking at should be able to have at least a broad idea of what it is you're describing.
Okay. I'm going to just share this as a good news while I look for another question. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Congratulations, Himanshu. So I think this question, the next question, is a follow-up about an earlier question regarding task 3 versus task 4.
Yeah, so again, good questions. Think of these tasks as completely different. So when you start task 3, your sole focus is to describe what's happening in that picture. So you're going to be talking about different people and what's going on in the present moment. When you start task 4 next, even though it's the same picture, you're going to be predicting what's going to happen in the future. You might talk about the same people, but in task 4, you're no longer describing what they're doing now. You're shifting gears to say this is what they're going to do next. So it's perfectly okay to talk about the same person in both scenes. It's just that your focus and your verb tense is completely different. So I hope that clarifies the questions coming for task 3 and 4. Good questions to have. Glad you've asked them.
Okay, so I'm going to go back a little bit. Here's a question from an earlier conversation. To start the introduction, can we start with as we can see in the picture?
I would probably use I, because you're the one looking at the picture. So when you say as we can see, it's a little bit unclear to the listener who is giving the description, right? So this again has to do with the precision of your delivery. Yeah, so you might say as I can see, or I'm looking at, right? Focus in on that present continuous verb tense again to keep it consistent. Yeah, so I'm looking at a picture of, I can see lots of people working out in a gym. That sort of thing would be a little bit more precise, I think.
Okay, here's one from Wiki. Hi, if you don't know the vocabulary of the picture, how to handle the situation?
Yeah, so again, two tips here. My favorite one is if you don't know what it is, just don't talk about it. There should be lots of other things in the picture that hopefully you do know and you can talk about them more comfortably. So that's the easiest way to go. The second part of it, though, if there's something that you want to talk about, but you're just lacking that one word. So remember the picture we looked at in the center of the gym? There was that man that was bench pressing that big weight. He was on his back and he was lifting that big weight above his head. If you don't know the word bench press, but you still want to talk about him, just use other language to convey that meaning. You might say, there's a man lying on a bench and he's lifting a heavy weight above his head. There. So I've explained what's happening clearly, and most people would understand that, even if I didn't say he's bench pressing a really heavy weight while his friend is spotting him from behind. Yeah, so you have to use the language that you know. And there are, at least with English, I guess a silver lining, there are so many ways that you can express the same idea. There's just such a variety of synonyms and paraphrased ideas. So yeah, your own handle on vocabulary will dictate the type of language that you'll use moving forward.
Okay, I think we're coming to the end of our questions. I didn't see anything more. I'm going to wait for a couple seconds. If you guys have any other last-minute questions that we can answer, just let us know in the comments as you are. Let me go back and see if there's anything. Okay. I think that's it, Brandy.
Excellent. I've given you some homework now to work on at home. So I really do hope you take the time to create your transcripts moving forward and do well on those tests that are upcoming maybe. So good luck with your studying.
Thank you. Okay, so that was Brandy with task 3 of the speaking test. If you have more questions that we couldn't answer, please either ask them in the comments or you can join us when Brandy comes back. And that's it for our session today. I haven't forgotten our trivia question. When did Canada become a self-governing dominion? The Dominion of Canada was officially born on July 1st, 1867. Until 1982, July 1st was celebrated as Dominion Day to commemorate the day that Canada became a self-governing dominion. Today, it is officially known as Canada Day. I know that somebody said this earlier, so I'm just going to see if I can grab that answer, if I can find it. Sorry, but you were right. Congratulations on getting the answer right. Oh, here. There you go. I found it. Congratulations. Anyway, our next episode will be on May 25th. So if you have questions you couldn't get answered today, please comment below, or you can also comment it on our next episode. You can also suggest topics that you would like to see on our show, anything you'd like to learn about the test. Please also consider connecting with us on social media. All updates will be posted there first, so do consider following us. Until our next episode, please stay safe and have a nice day. Bye.